Okay, so this lesson is actually about dative covalent bonding. But before I actually talk about that, what I want to do is to remind us about covalent bonding and what it actually is. So on the screen I've got a couple of diagrams to illustrate covalent bonding. The first one is obviously the covalent bonding between two hydrogen atoms, this one and this one, to form a hydrogen molecule. And we represent this again with dot and cross diagrams. A dot representing electrons from one element and a cross representing the electrons from the other atom. It may be the same element, it may be a different element. In this case we've got a hydrogen atom and another hydrogen atom crossed with the electron from the one hydrogen atom and a dot with the electron from the other hydrogen atom. So when these join together they form a covalent bond which exists between the two hydrogen atoms to form the hydrogen molecule, and you'll see that the shared electrons sit in the space which is the overlap of the two outer shells. It's very important that the electrons go in there. If you don't draw them in there, you will effectively lose marks in an exam question, so be very careful the way you draw your diagrams. And this second example, exactly the same principle. One chlorine atom joined to another chlorine atom to make a chlorine molecule. These are the electrons on the one chlorine atom, these are the electrons in the other with dots and crosses respectively, and these are the shared electrons sitting in the space where the shells overlap. And we can also represent that quite simply as a Cl with a line to Cl, and likewise up here if we look hydrogen to hydrogen. So that's what a covalent is. It's a sharing of a pair of electrons, or a sharing of two pairs of electrons, or in some cases the sharing of three pairs of electrons between atoms in a molecule. So let's move on to what dative covalent bonding is then. Dative covalent bonding is quite simply where the shared pair of electrons actually comes from one of the elements alone. And here is the classic example of an ammonia forming an ammonium ion. So this is ammonia. You can see we have three covalent bonds. This one, hydrogen and a nitrogen electron being shared. Same here and the same here. And you can see we've got a lone pair of electrons up here. Now if we actually add a hydrogen ion to this, what we actually get is this molecule. And this molecule is an ammonium molecule. And you can see that these two electrons are actually from the nitrogen atom. In other words, the hydrogen is not contributing any of the electrons to that shared pair. It's actually effectively sharing a pair of electrons which are given to it from the nitrogen atom. And because we have an odd number of protons and electrons now, this molecule actually has a single positive charge, because we've added no more electrons, but effectively hydrogen is actually a proton. So we've actually increased the number of protons by one. We've got the same number of electrons, so we've effectively got one positive over. Hence we put it in square brackets and we show this with the positive sign up here. And this is our dative covalent bond. We have other examples which I'll move on to, and there is a shorthand for writing this. So let's quickly look at the shorthand for writing this molecule. So here it is. Here's a shorthand version of this molecule. Again, we follow the same convention. You can see that we've got a little stick line between the nitrogen and the hydrogens, which represents normal covalent bonds. So we've got three normal covalent bonds. But in this case, this hydrogen up here is receiving its electrons, its two electrons, from the nitrogen atom. And we show that by drawing a couple of dots to represent the two electrons, and an arrow pointing towards the element that is actually sharing the electrons. So in this case, hydrogen is receiving the electrons from the nitrogen, so the arrow is pointed towards the hydrogen. So we have effectively two representations of the same molecule. We have the dot and cross diagram up here, and we have probably the easier but more figurative, as it were, a molecule drawn down here with lines to represent the bonds. So that's it. That's dative covalent bonding. It's the sharing of a pair of electrons between atoms, where the electrons come from one of the elements forming the bond only. And in this case, just recap, it's the pair of electrons which are from the nitrogen being shared by a hydrogen ion to form this ammonium molecule. Hope that makes sense, and we'll move on with further examples in the next how-to explanation video. Thanks.